When people start thinking about making a move to or within Calgary, the first question that always comes up is which part of the city should they actually move to? If you're in that situation, you're going to want to stick around because in this multi-part video series, I'm going to be breaking down the entire city into its different geographic regions. I'll be taking you out into the streets, we'll be looking at some pricing information, what the areas look like, and an honest assessment of the pros and cons of living in those neighborhoods. My name is Ryan Gillard at eXp Realty. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. As you can see, we're out here in Ramsay overlooking the downtown portion of the city, and we're going to be talking about my favorite region of the city, where to live in the city center district of Calgary. Now, if you're out there watching this and you could use some help buying or selling, or even if you're relocating here from somewhere else, feel free to reach out to me. All of my contact information is in the written description below, and I would love to help you out. So let's get into it. Let's talk about where to live in the city center region of Calgary. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the inner city of Calgary. Now, everybody has their own definition of what constitutes the inner city, but for this video, I'm using what the Calgary Real Estate Board classifies as the city center. So that's everything in this dark pinkish area right here. So all this stuff is what we're talking about as the inner city. Might be a little easier to look on Google Maps to figure that out. So obviously here's Calgary. So for the most part, we're talking about everything. So this is Glenmore Trail right here. This is one of the busier east-west freeways in the city. So everything north of Glenmore Trail. So now on this dividing line, this is the Deerfoot Trail. This is the busiest freeway in the city. So if you take this freeway, it'll take you all the way to Edmonton if you go north. And if you go south, it'll take you all the way to the United States. So everything west of the Deerfoot, everything north of Glenmore Trail. And for the most part, it's everything to the east of Crowchild Trail right here. But we're going to include a few other neighborhoods here. So there's Killarney, there's Shaganappi, and there's a couple in here that we'll talk about as well. So everything, for the most part, everything east of Crowchild Trail. So here's the Trans-Canada Highway. And we're going to talk about everything, all this region right here, and then some of the stuff around here. So that's what we're talking about as the inner city today. And so the first things first, this is the downtown core right here. We'll start right in the downtown. And a good way to look at the downtown is I have this picture right here. So it's broken up into different regions. So right here, obviously you see the big the high rises. This is what's classified as the downtown commercial core. This area right here is called Eau Claire. Obviously, we're looking south as well. So this is south this direction. So this is called the West End, this little chunk right here. This is the East Village over here, the Chinatown right here. And behind all these buildings is called the Beltline. So we'll start with Eau Claire. Eau Claire, a very cool neighborhood. Obviously, you can see this is Prince's Island Park right here, and there are a lot of condo developments. You can see a bunch over here. Some pretty fancy ones over here. A lot of them you see a lot of high-rise condos in here. You'll see townhouses, and you'll see some of them, you can't really see it too well in here, but a lot of these are backing on right to this running path. So this is, in the summertime, you'll see people walking dogs, skateboarding, cycling, jogging. There's festivals in this park, all sorts of stuff. You'll see people rafting down the Bow River here. So this area can get quite pricey just because you can pretty much walk to downtown in a few blocks and you've got lots of activities in this park area here. So a typical condo in this area, it might run you about $500,000, but they can also get quite pricey in here. I've seen sales up to as high as $2 million in this Eau Claire area. So Eau Claire is the most expensive part of the downtown. Other things that you'll see in Eau Claire, I believe it's right here, is the Eau Claire Market. This is a mall. It's my entire life, this mall has been kind of goofy. Whenever I go in there, it seems like half the stores are closed. They've been trying to revitalize this area for the longest time. But there is a mall here. I believe the LRT Green Line will be coming up around here as well. Lots of development around here, but for some reason they can't seem to figure out this mall. Other things that you might like to know about, the Peace Bridge is right here. It's a bit of a tourist attraction. What else do we have? For Eau Claire, again, Chinatown is over here. Lots of different bars and restaurants around this pocket. It's a very cool area. So the next part of downtown that we're going to talk about is what's referred to as the West End. So again, this photo is facing south, and so the West End is this pocket right here. It's mainly built up of like high-rise commercial buildings and high-rise condos. An average price for a condo in this area might run you between, say, 200 to 400,000 is the bulk of activity in this area. So it's a good convenient area. So you can pretty much walk from here to downtown in maybe 10, 15 minutes or so. Not very long at all. You can cross the bridge here. Actually, I'm going to pull up my Google map here. So it might show you a little better. So again, here's the West End. You can walk from here to downtown, no problem at all. There's even a free C-train line. I would say it runs between maybe about here to here. It's all free. Once you get out of those areas, you'll have to pay for it. But right in the urban core of downtown, it's free. So you can walk to downtown or take the train. You can walk across multiple bridges to get into the Kensington area. All along 10th Street and Kensington Road, there's lots of different bars, shops, and restaurants. You've got easy access to the park system, Eau Claire Park, Princess Island Park. If you go south of the West End, 17th Avenue right here is walking distance. 17th Avenue is like where all like the shops, restaurants, pubs, all along 17th Avenue. It's probably the most lively part of Calgary. And the West End, you can walk to all these different areas in, I'd say, 10, 15 minutes. Now, the one thing I don't like about the West End is there are some pockets of it that are pretty slummy. Not all of it. Again, downtown is very street specific, so you could be right over here. There's actually a McDonald's around here on the C-train line. Where does it here? It's around here. There's a McDonald's. We jokingly call it Crack Max because there's always some kind of shady stuff going on. But you can walk like 1 block away and it's totally fine. So there are pockets of the West End that are a bit slummy, but not the whole region by any means. So moving along, we're going to talk about the downtown East Village. So that's this little pocket right here, downtown East Village. And you might be able to see it better on this photo here. So the East Village is this little pocket right over here. It's not a huge area, but it's very cool. And so on the Google map here, you can see where it is. So downtown, right over here, the Calgary Tower. City Hall will be right around here. So it's close to everything. Now, if this was like any time before 2010, I would like pretty much never go to this area. It used to be one of the worst parts of Calgary. It was like old decrepit buildings and like lots of homeless, and it just wasn't a very nice area. But ever since 2010, there's been a lot of redevelopment in this area. Lots of brand new condos. They're knocking down the old ones, making new condos. Lots of development in this area. And it's close to everything. If you're living in this area, you can walk to downtown. You can walk to the shops in Inglewood along 9th Avenue. Lots of stuff along the river here, like jogging, walking your dogs. There's dog parks in here. You can walk to the zoo, which is over here. If you're into NHL games, the arena is just right over here. During the summertime, the Stampede is this section right over here. So it's just a good, convenient area. There's a C-train stop right here, so you can connect to the other lines. Just a great area. Lots of redevelopment. More expensive than the West End, but not as expensive as Eau Claire. I'd say in this area, most of the condos, they'd run you between 200 to 600,000. You get less for your money than the West End, but the properties are newer. So that's about it for the East Village. Very cool area. So the next part of the downtown that we're going to talk about is what's referred to as the Beltline neighborhood. You can't see it all that well from this photo, but it's everything behind all of these buildings here. So you can see it a little bit better from the Google map. So the Beltline is this region right here. So kind of everything between 14th Street, 17th Ave, and 10th Ave is right over here. This pocket right here is all the Beltline. This is the heart of the city. This is the most lively and most densely packed part of the city. Mostly like high-rise apartments. There are some low-rise. You won't see any detached properties here. Excellent location. The knock against Calgary for the longest time is that the downtown is like a ghost town after business hours. So a lot of people, they don't live in the downtown. They live in parts like the neighborhoods we spoke about earlier, plus the Beltline. So you'll see people, they'll walk to work from the Beltline, all the pubs and restaurants on 17th Avenue. There are bike lanes throughout here. There's stuff everywhere. It's a very built up area. The price ranges quite a bit. You can get into a condo in this part of town for like $150,000, and it'll go up to like say $2 million and everything in between. But a good average in this area for a condo would be about $300,000, I would say, is probably the average price. For the next area, I'm going to lump in a few areas together just because they have a similar feel and idea. And that will be Lower Mount Royal, this little tiny pocket right here, Cliff Bungalow, Mission, and Erlton. So I'll pull up the map here again. So Lower Mount Royal is this little stretch right here. Cliff Bungalow is this tiny little pocket right here. Mission is all of this towards the river. And Erlton is this section right here. Now, this part of the city is my favorite region of the entire city. I've lived in Mission for probably 10 years. I lived there. It's close enough to downtown where you can still walk everywhere, yet it's far enough away where it becomes just a little bit quieter compared to the Beltline. Just a super walkable area all along 4th Street. All along 4th Street and 17th Avenue are all different pubs, restaurants, shops. There's a grocery store over here. One of the best gyms in the whole city is right over here, next to an excellent park. If you're into jogging like I am, there's an excellent river path where you can jog down some of the nicest neighborhoods in the entire city. Stampede grounds are over here. You can walk to the NHL games at the Saddle Dome. There's 2 C-train stops, the Stampede station somewhere over here, and the Erlton stop. The Erlton stop somewhere over here, and the Stampede stop is over there. So it's one of the top areas of the whole city. I would definitely mark it on your map if you're thinking of relocating here from somewhere else, and you want to live somewhere that's lively, that has a lot going on. I would definitely flag this region of the city. In terms of pricing, so let's start at Erlton, and we'll work our way back towards Lower Mount Royal. Erlton can be divided into 2. So this part of it, so the dividing line is 25th Avenue. North of 25th Avenue, this area is mostly townhouses, like those brownstone 3 or 4 levels. They have a double attached garages. Some of them back onto the river. And there are pockets of just conventional condos in here as well. The condos might run you, say, $300,000 to $600,000 as a good rule of thumb. And the townhouses can get pretty pricey. I've seen them from, they say, like $750,000 all the way to just over $1 million, I would say. On the south side of 25th Avenue, this is a giant hill. You can't really see it from the map. And just little tiny pocket of older detached houses. They're running you, I'd say, around 500 to maybe 800,000. And there are a few of them that actually back onto the river that I've seen as high as 3 million. But that's pretty rare. Most of these are quite old, and good spot though, good convenient location. So moving on next to Mission, one of the best spots in the entire city. You can get into a condo here for as low as, say, $150,000, and there are multi-million-dollar condos here as well. So it ranges wildly. It's got something for everyone. There's even old folks condo towers in here. So the young and old both live in Mission. It's just super convenient. So everything is within walking distance. Cliff Bungalow is similar to Mission in that the condos are roughly the same kind of pricing, same idea. You'll find a lot more detached properties within Cliff Bungalow. So they're not like, mostly these are like really old, narrow lot kind of detached homes, like 1910s. Lots of character, especially if they're fixed up. They look quite nice. But very similar to Mission, but you just see a bit more detached properties in this little pocket. Lower Mount Royal, not to be confused with Mount Royal, which is this area, which is probably the most expensive part of Calgary. Lower Mount Royal is a similar idea to both Cliff Bungalow and Mission. You'll see a lot of condos, conventional condos. I find the main difference is that Lower Mount Royal, you'll see a bit more of the townhouses, which you'll get, I'd say, maybe between 400,000 to maybe 1.5 million, depending on the age and how upgraded they are. And that would be the main difference between Lower Mount Royal and the others. But overall, this area has a similar feel to it. So we'll head back to the west side of downtown briefly here. So we're going to talk about these two areas here, Sunalta and Scarboro. And actually, we can also throw in Scarboro, Sunalta West, it's called, just on the west side of the Crowchild Highway. So this pocket right here, not a very big area. So Sunalta, yeah, not too different from the West End. So everything I said about the West End, it still applies to Sunalta. I find the main difference between the two of them is that on the west side of downtown, you see a lot of like the high-rise condos. In Sunalta, you'll see a lot of low-rise condos, lots of rentals, pretty good price point. If you're looking to get into the market, I've seen condos here as low as like $100,000. And if you're looking to buy a property then rent it out, that's another option. Why I would consider Sunalta. There's a C train stop right over here, so it's a good, convenient area. Not overly expensive. There are pockets of detached houses, which might get you to like say 500 to 1 million, depending on the age and whatnot. Other things to mention about Sunalta, I believe the Calgary tennis club is in Sunalta as well. So not too much to talk about in terms of Sunalta. It's not terribly different from the Beltline or the West End. But this area right here called Scarboro, it's very different than everything else that we've talked about so far. So everything else that we've talked about so far has been like densely populated areas, like lots of condos, townhouses. Scarboro, this is all detached homes from like the turn of the century. These are all like 1900s mansions on like winding streets. Very good price point, very a good average price point. I think they're about 800 to 1.5 million on average. And I've seen some in here that go for about 3 million. It's a very tiny pocket of the city. And I imagine most Calgarians have no idea this exists. It's very close to downtown, but it's all detached homes and they're quite expensive. If we move across the Crowchild Trail, this pocket right here is called Sunalta Scarboro West. Not a very original name. We hardly ever go to this area. This area right here, along with Scarborough, I think I've showed one property as a realtor in like 10 years. So you don't really see too much action here. People move into these areas and they just don't seem to leave for whatever reason, the good areas. In this area right here, the west side of the highway, I've seen properties here around 2 million, but I'd say most of these are maybe between 700 to 1.5 million. It starts to get hilly as you cross over the Crowchild Trail. So some of these properties do have views. I go to this area quite often because I golf at this course right here, Shaganappi Point Golf Course. It's a city-owned course, but it's quite nice. And the driving range has some of the best views of downtown in the whole city, if you're interested in that. But other than that, there's not too much to say about this region of the city. The next two areas that we're going to talk about here are Bankview, this area right here, Bankview, and South Calgary. A bit of a misleading name being in the city center. And these two areas are very unique. They're very similar areas. Probably one of the hilliest parts of the city. It kind of reminds me of it'd be like a neighborhood from San Francisco. Just very steep roads, very hilly. Very cool area. Lots going on, lots of construction, lots of redevelopment. So I would say on the eastern half of both of these neighborhoods, you see a lot of old condos, a lot of older properties that were detached properties at one point being torn down to make room for townhouses and newer condos. So I would say that's the trend for the eastern half. Still a good location on the eastern half. You've got a good access to 14th Street. There's lots of stuff to do on there, as well as 17th Avenue. So pretty convenient location. And on the western part of these two neighborhoods, I find there's a bit more of the detached home feel versus the eastern half. And you start getting into a lot of infills as well, where they take an older like full-size lot, they knock it down and they make two homes attached, so like a duplex. You see a lot of that on the eastern half, especially in the South Calgary area. 33rd Avenue, so this region right here is what's referred to as the Marda Loop area. So on the western half of these areas, it's pretty convenient because there's lots of stuff to do on 33rd Avenue as well as down was it Garrison Boulevard. So very popular areas and a good price point too. Like if you look at Bankview, you can probably get into one of those starter condos for probably 125 to 150,000 and up. I would say the area maxes out if you can find a detached property there with a good lots, maybe in front of a park or something like that. Maybe it maxes out like a 1.5 million. South Calgary, everything I said about Bankview, I would say it applies to South Calgary. They're very similar neighborhoods. And so moving along, we'll talk about this area here called Richmond. So next up is the area of Richmond. So here again, Bankview, South Calgary, Richmond / like Nob Hill is this area right here. Not too different from the western parts of both of these areas. I look at this area as kind of like an infill heaven. A lot of these older like 1950s homes are being knocked down to make room for infills. So great area. It's a quieter version of Bankview in South Calgary. Lots of good schools in this area. Good access roads. You can get onto Crowchild Trail very quickly. Crowchild will take you pretty much from the reservoir all the way up into the outskirts of the city. So good access routes, good schools, everything along the Marda Loop area at 33rd Avenue. Tons of different stores, shops, restaurants along 33rd Avenue. There's a Safeway over here, and the different bars throughout the area. So this is one of the most popular parts of the city, this whole Marda Loop region. And Richmond is a very popular area in high demand. I would say an older, like 1950s type home might run you between, say, 500 to 800,000, depending if it's just land value or if it's been upgraded in some way. A lot of the duplexes that you see here, I'd say you get some from the early 2000s that might be like 700,000-ish. To some of the brand new stuff might be 1.5 million. And there are also a lot of detached properties in this area as well. And they might run you up to like 1.5 million plus. So moving across 33rd Avenue here are the next two areas that make up part of the Marda Loop area. And again, Marda Loop is not actually a specific neighborhood. It's just like a generic name for this whole region. People just call it Marda Loop. So there are two more neighborhoods here on the south side. Altadore right here, and this region right here is called Garrison Woods. So at one point it was a military base, CFB Curry Barracks, and they've ever since the mid 2000s, I believe, they've been heavily like redeveloping this area, and now it's one of the coolest parts of the city. It has some real character, unlike a lot of Calgary, especially when you go into the suburbs. Everything looks identical. But this is like one of the few areas where it just has its own unique look to it. Very cool area. It has a mix of everything. You'll see a lot of brownstone type townhouses, condo developments, along with detached properties. You'll see everything in this neighborhood. It's got some good walking paths, some good parks. So in terms of pricing for Garrison Woods, I would say a detached property here, you're looking maybe like 600 to 900,000. The townhouses are maybe like 500 to 800, and you'll see a lot of condos that could be like say 250 to 500. So it ranges wildly, and it's got a bit of something for everyone. Very cool area. I'd put a star beside this if you're looking at something that's very walkable, that's got close to all the different restaurants and stuff like that. One of my favorite regions. The last area to make up one of the Marda Loop communities is the area of Altadore. Now, this neighborhood is one of the most popular neighborhoods in the entire city. It just has a bit of everything. It's far enough from downtown that it has a residential feel, but it's still close enough that you could drive there in, I don't know, say 10, 15 minutes or so. It's got some of the best schools in the entire city. Got excellent shopping along 33rd Avenue. Good price points. It is expensive, but it's not as expensive as other parts of the inner city like Mount Royal or like Roxboro or stuff like that. It's still within reach for many people. You can get some of these older 1950s bungalows that are maybe like, say, 600s to 1 million. The average price in this area is around 1 million, and some of these brand new homes can get up to say 3 million. So it does range quite a bit. There are some condo developments along 33rd to 35th Avenues, and I'd say condos along there might be around 200 to say 400,000. Some of the semi-detached properties, like the duplexes, they might be around 600 to 1.5 million, and the townhouses might be around 300 to 700,000. So it does range quite a bit. There's a bit of something for everyone. One of the best areas of the city, very popular. I would definitely put a star beside this if you're not from Calgary and you're thinking about moving to this city. This whole region of Marda Loop is one of the most popular regions of Calgary. So next up are the two areas on the east side. So just outside of downtown are Inglewood, this area right here, and Ramsay. So again, let's pull up the Google Maps. So that's this district right here. This is Inglewood, and this is Ramsay right here. I always kind of lump them in together. It just makes sense. So this is where the city was actually settled. So the Bow River is right here, obviously, and this is the Elbow River right here. So where they converged is where the city was actually developed. So Inglewood is the oldest neighborhood in the city, and it's hard to describe the area in just a few sentences because, like, you'll find some luxury homes that are backing onto the river that can get up to like $3 million, and then you'll find pockets of Inglewood where you can buy a house, like a detached home from like 1900, for like $300,000. And you'll see there's condo developments along 9th Avenue, and some of them stuff over here is some denser condo developments. You'll even see some townhouses throughout the area as well. All along 9th Avenue, you'll see a lot of, I'd say, very original shops. Not the same stuff that you see elsewhere. Like you'll see like vintage furniture stores and like rollerblade shops that sell like the old school versions. It's kind of like an indie type neighborhood. It's very cool, very original. Again, detached homes, they run from say 400,000 all the way up into the millions. Condos in Inglewood, I'd say they're roughly between say 200 to 600, and townhouses might be like 350 to 800. It's a very unique area. There's lots to do just along the river path. Other stuff, Pierce Estate Park, one of the nicer parks in the city. There's an Inglewood bird sanctuary right here if you're into birding. It's a pretty big area. What else do we have here? So it's not far from downtown. Obviously, just you can walk to downtown, not too far away. So that's what I would say about Inglewood. Moving along to Ramsay, just the neighboring community right here, Ramsay. Yeah, Calgary is a very master plan type city, especially when you get out into the suburbs. Like everything is kind of, master planned. Everything is where it should be. It's very organized. But Ramsay is like a little neighborhood right next to a big industrial area, which you don't really see too much in Calgary. So if I zoom out, this whole region, you can see all the train tracks right here. All of this whole region right here, even down into here, is pretty much all industrial and commercial. And then you have this neighborhood tucked into it. So it's very original where you'll see homes that are like $300,000. I sold a couple there last year around that price range. And they'll be like next to like a warehouse, which you don't really see too often in Calgary. So it's a very unique area. There are pockets that are very expensive. If you go up, you can't really see it too often on the map, but this is a big hill going all the way up here. And homes along this ridge right here, they can be up to $3 million, and they have spectacular views, probably one of the best views in the city of the downtown. So Ramsay, a very unique area. Not too much else to say other than that. All right, so now we're moving into the most expensive region of the city. So this part from Upper Mount Royal, Rideau Park, Roxboro, Elboya Park, Britannia, Elboya, parts of Windsor Park, and into Bel-Aire and Mayfair. This whole region is ultra expensive. One of the nicest areas of the whole city. So let's go back to the Google Maps here. So as a reference, here's downtown over here. So we spoke about Mount Royal earlier. Lower Mount Royal is kind of like the version of Cliff Bungalow and Mission, lots of townhouses and condos. When you move into Upper Mount Royal, This is strictly detached properties. There are no townhouses or condos. These are all like huge mansions, big winding streets, big lots, huge mansions. Like the average price in this area is 2 million, and in this region, prices can go over like 7 million. I think I saw one in Elbow Park that was around 10 million. But this is like the most expensive neighborhood in the city on average. And the one thing I like about it is that it's not all made by one builder. Like if you go out to the suburbs, like all the homes look identical. When you're in Mount Royal, like everything looks unique. Just a very cool, like, high-end, exclusive neighborhood. So if Bruce Wayne lived in Calgary, he'd probably live in Mount Royal. It's just that type of area. Moving south into Elbow Park, so everything below Premier Way, the river to Premier Way to 14th Street. This is Elbow Park. Very similar to Mount Royal, similar pricing. I would say Elbow Park is a combination of Mount Royal and Rideau and Roxboro, in that there are parts of Elbow Park that are along the river. And so Rideau Park and Roxboro, easy way to describe this area, they're not very big. They're just beautiful, beautiful homes along the river is the easiest way to describe this area. One thing I like about these two neighborhoods is that you can have like a really nice mansion along the river, but you can still walk down 14th Street over the Elbow River, and you get all the shops and restaurants along 4th Street and 17th Ave. They're all walking distance from this pocket. Very exclusive area. Not too many sales come up in this area, and if they do, they are sold pretty fast. Pricing in this area, Roxboro, Rideau Park, I believe it goes up to like say 4 million. But it's always changing, but it is that expensive. Very nice area. Again, Elbow Park, I think I saw one that was around 10 million here at one point. It can be very pricey. Similar in price to Mount Royal. So this region right here is probably like the most expensive part of the city. Other things to note about this area is it's got excellent parks, like River Park right here, Riverdale Park over here. Excellent dog parks. I jog along this path quite often. So excellent jogging routes. There's a beach right over here, Stanley Park, sorry. So what people do is they'll drive here to Riverdale Park and they'll tube down the river. And it doesn't look like it's that far, but during the summertime, the river flows very slowly, and it might take a couple hours to go from here all the way around. And people usually get out around the Mission area. So a very popular summer pastime is to go tubing. Just excellent location. You can get to McLeod Trail quite easily. McLeod Trail, it's basically all commercial shops, easy access to downtown, easy access to the Marda Loop area. So it's just a prime location, and the price reflects it. Moving further south now, Elboya. Everything I said about the other areas like Rideau Park, Roxboro, they do apply to this pocket over here of Elboya. The stuff along the river, pretty much the same thing I said about Elbow Park or Rideau and Roxboro, it applies to this area. As you get further outside of the river, prices do come down a little bit, but still a very pricey area. You'll see homes up to, I'd say most of the activity in this area outside of being on the river would be like 800,000 to like 1.2 or 3 million. So moving across the river, let's talk about Parkhill, which is this tiny little area right over here. Not a big area, and it's actually kind of a confusing area to drive around in. It seems like whenever I'm in there, I'm lost. But it's a very nice area, has a bit of everything. It looks like it's right on the river, but it's not. It's actually, there's a big hill coming up this direction, and there's kind of like a cliff over here. So this area is actually overlooking Elbow Park, probably about like 100 meters above the river. So you got some excellent views. There are condo developments up here, and so it just has a bit of everything in here. Like you'll find condos that are like 200 to 400,000. Some of the really luxury type homes might be pushing 2 million in here. So very pricey, but not quite as pricey as like Elbow Park and Mount Royal. Very nice neighborhood. It's got excellent access to McLeod Trail. McLeod Trail, if you're not familiar with it, it goes all the way into downtown, and it goes all the way south out of the city. So it's a major route, and so Parkhill has got easy access to that. My knock against this area is like whenever I come here, there's always like some cement barricade blocking off one of these roads, and I'm always lost whenever I come in here. But other than that, it is a good area. So the next regions of the city we're talking about here are Windsor Park, Meadowlark Park, Bel-Aire, and Mayfair. So on the map, so Windsor Park refers to this area south of 50th Avenue all the way to 58th Avenue. So Windsor Park is a bit of a mixed bag. It's got a bit of everything in it. And where it's situated is pretty convenient. So you have Elbow Drive right here, very busy road, and you have McLeod Trail, one of the busier north-south corridors in the city. Both of these roads, if you take McLeod Trail, it'll go all the way to downtown, and Elbow Drive will take you all the way into Mission, pretty much. So it's got good access routes, and if you take those two roads south, they'll take you all the way down into the deep south of Calgary. And it has Glenmore Trail right here, which is one of the busier east-west freeways of the city. And to top it all off, it's actually, this right here is Chinook Center. This is the biggest mall within the city limits. So it's just got a bit of everything. It's a very good central location. And so what it's like here, it's a bit of a mixed bag, like I said, in that you will see entire streets here that are all condos from like the 1970s, like a pretty good price point. You'll see condos in this area from like 100,000 to like 300,000. And then you'll see detached properties along the golf course here that are like 2.5 million. And everything in between. Like you'll see townhouses throughout this area around 500,000. You'll see older infill type properties from like the early 90s that might be around 750,000. And some of the fixed up or newer properties, newer detached properties, they might be around like 1.5 million. So it's got a bit of everything in this neighborhood. It's definitely not as pricey as some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, like in Elboya or Mount Royal, unless you're in this little tiny pocket right here on the golf course. Other than that, it's fairly affordable for the inner city, basically. So that's how I describe Windsor Park. If we go a bit further south here, this region right here is called Meadowlark Park. So just behind the mall right here, this little tiny pocket right here, this area is basically 1950, 1960 type bungalows on big lots. And you'll see it's not nearly as pricey as the neighborhoods over here that we'll talk about. But I'd say that you get a nice home in this area that's fixed up. It might be just over $1 million. So it's not cheap by any means, but it's not nearly as pricey as these two areas. If you're looking for a bungalow, this is a good spot for you. A starter bungalow in this area might be around 500,000, and they might top out around 1 million. So a pretty good area, nice and convenient. One of the knocks against this area is it's just situated in a very busy area. Elbow Drive is a very busy road, and Glenmore Trail, I'd say, is like the second busiest road in the entire city after the Deerfoot. So if you're living around this pocket, you'll probably get a lot of traffic noise, and Elbow Drive is busy all the time. But other than that, it's a very nice neighborhood. It's just the one knock in my mind is that it's just a very busy location. So moving across Elbow Drive, we find the two areas of Bel-Aire and Mayfair. Two very expensive neighborhoods. Bel-Aire is more expensive than Mayfair. The average price in this little neighborhood is about $2 million. You will see homes in here sell for like $4 or $5 million. One of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city. It's all detached properties, no townhouses or condos as far as I know. Why I would consider this area, it's right next to the Calgary Golf and Country Club. Cycling and running along the river paths. If you're into sailing, the Glenmore Reservoir is right here. Maybe if you're working at the Rocky View General Hospital, that is right over here, just south of Glenmore Trail. My knock against Bel-Aire is if I was rich enough to spend $5 million on a property, in my own preference, I would look at Mount Royal or like Roxboro. Just I find this area is too busy. Like Elbow Trail is a very busy Elbow Drive, is a very busy road. Glenmore Trail is like it's a freeway basically. It's a very busy road. It just seems odd to me that there's such an expensive area in such a busy area. Mayfair, very similar to Mount Royal, very similar to Bel-Aire, sorry, but maybe not quite as expensive. Mayfair, you might see properties maybe topping at 2 million versus like 4 million up in Bel-Aire. I'd be a bit cautious about some of these roads that are right next to the Glenmore Trail. This road is busy nonstop. So I don't know if I'd dish out $2 million to live with a lot of traffic noise. But once you get a bit deeper into this area, I don't think you'll hear the traffic. But still, this area is still very busy. Just crossing over Glenmore, it's one of the busier pockets of the whole city. That's my knock against this area, but by no means is it a bad area, one of the most exclusive parts of Calgary. So we're pretty much done with everything south of the river. There is two little areas over here that we should mention that they are considered part of the inner city. In my mind, they're considered West End, but we'll just briefly touch on them. So that's the two areas of Killarney and Shaganappi. So very similar areas. So like I said, I consider them part of the West End, which is this region all over here is considered the West End. They're very popular for many reasons. They have just a good prime location, not too far from downtown. You can take this road right here, Bow Trail, all the way to downtown and in the opposite direction to the outskirts of the city. It's quite fast to get from the outskirts to downtown, maybe 15 minutes or so. So there's a mall over here. There's a C-train line that runs up 17th Avenue. You've got good access to Marda Loop, which is right over here, all those shops and stores that we talked about. Again, downtown. The university is just over here, University of Calgary. And in the other direction is the university, Mount Royal University is over here. If you take Richmond Road, there's a giant shopping center over here. Everything you could think of is in this area. So it's close to everything. And the neighborhoods itself have a mix of everything as well. So it's not nearly as expensive as like the Mount Royal and the Roxboro areas. A detached home, like a newer version, might be topping out like 1.2 million. There's a lot of condos in the area. They might be like 300s. Some of the older properties might be like 500 to 800. So it has a mix of everything, and it's just in a good, convenient location. So that's all I'll say pretty much about these two areas. Again, I will make my own a separate video on the West End in general, and I'll touch more on them at that point. So stay tuned. Next up are the regions. So just across the river from downtown, we'll look at Bridgeland, right over here, Renfrew, Crescent Heights, and Rosedale. So on the map, now you can't really see it because, where are we here? So Center Street right here, this is going like straight uphill all the way to pretty much around 16th Avenue. And there's a big ridge that runs right here, almost like a cliff, and you can't really see it all that well. So we're talking about this area right here, Rosedale, the Crescent Heights, Bridgeland, and Riverside, and then downtown is right here. So just to get your bearings, so this road right here, this is the Trans-Canada Highway. So all along the Trans-Canada Highway, there's the SAIT, which is the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. There's a shopping center right here, not a big one, but a small mall with a grocery store and maybe like 30 or 40 shops or so. The University of Calgary is just over here. And lots of busy roads around here. So Edmonton Trail right here and Center Street, they run up from downtown and they go all the way to about McKnight Boulevard. All along Edmonton Trail and Center Street are different shops, stores, and whatnot. Same with 16th Avenue. And it's also worth mentioning, Memorial Drive is this road right here. This is one of the easier ways to get east-west throughout the city. So if you take it west, it'll go all the way and link up with the Trans-Canada Highway over here. And if you take it towards the east, it'll take you pretty much to the outskirts of the city towards 68th Street. So and the Deerfoot Trail is right here. This is the fastest or the busiest north-south corridor freeway in the city. And so these areas, they're all prime location, easy to get everywhere, lots of stores. So we'll start in Bridgeland, one of the older neighborhoods in Calgary. So again, this is Inglewood right here. We spoke about this area. This was the first neighborhood of Calgary. So it's just across the river from that. So you can tell walking around, it's a very old neighborhood. This section over here is like all like 1910 properties. They might sell around say 400 to 800,000, depending on if they've been upgraded or not, or just simply land value. It's noteworthy to mention First Avenue right here. Some of the coolest stores in the city are found in Bridgeland, I think. It's got its own charm, very old neighborhood. So lots of different stores and restaurants on First Avenue. This section of Bridgeland right here is all being revitalized. It's all like high-rise, brand new condo developments all throughout this neighborhood. And these condos, they might, on average, might be like say 250 to 400K-ish, give or take. So very cool area. It's close to everything. And again, there's a big hill right here. You can't really see it. But once you get on top of the hill into Renfrew, Renfrew is way more residential than Bridgeland. Bridgeland seems very busy when you're there. There's just lots of construction, lots of condos being developed. Renfrew is more of a detached, a quieter neighborhood. There are pockets of it over here. There are some townhouses, some developments along Edmonton Trail and 16th Avenue. But the bulk of the neighborhood are like older detached properties. Some of the higher end stuff that might have been redeveloped in front of parks and stuff like that might run you like 1.2 million. So it's still pretty pricey, but not nearly as pricey as the other stuff like in the inner city that we spoke about, like the Mount Royal, Elboya Park and stuff like that. So this area is a bit of a hidden gem. It doesn't get nearly as much attention as other areas of the city. And I'm guilty of it myself. Whenever I go into Bridgeland, and I always think to myself, wow, this is a really cool area. I should spend more time here. But it always seems to lose out to other areas that are kind of similar, like the Kensington area over here, or Mission we spoke about earlier. So it's definitely it's like the northeast version of those areas that are like in the inner city that are highly built up. So definitely put a star beside it. If you'd like to be walking distance to everywhere, but you want to be north of the river, this could be a good spot for you. Crescent Heights. So we'll actually swing over here first. We'll talk about Rosedale. Rosedale is easier to describe than Crescent Heights. So I believe it starts at 4th Street. So right over here, 4th Street to 16th Ave, and this whole pocket right here. This is one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city. There's no condos or townhouses. These are all strictly detached properties, and they're all like really high end. This road right here, Crescent Road, I'll zoom in here. Crescent Road runs along this ridge. This is like a big cliff right here. You can't really see it from the map, but Crescent Road runs all the way like this, and then kind of towards Center Street over here. This view from here is one of the nicest views of the city. So an unobstructed view of the downtown, and the homes that are on Crescent Road can be super expensive. Some of the most expensive homes in the city are found on Crescent Road. But even the stuff in Rosedale that's not on the cliff, it's still, everything here is very fancy. Some of the properties in Rosedale might push, say, 3-4 million, maybe even more than that. Maybe maxing out at, say, 4 million, I would say. So that's Rosedale. So I'll swing back towards Crescent Heights. Now this area is one of the harder areas to describe because there's all sorts of different pockets of it. Along the cliff here, so this part over here of Crescent Heights is on the side of a hill. So it's very hilly right here. And some of these condo developments can be on top of the hill as well, and they're overlooking downtown. Can be very pricey. I've seen stuff into the millions here for condos, but on average, most of these condos throughout here, the max would be like, say, 500,000. Most of these would be like in the 300s to the 500s. So that's this section of Crescent Heights. So this area is all like mostly condos. When you get up the hill, on top of the hill here, this region of Crescent Heights, it's got everything. It's a bit of a mixed bag. It's hard to describe it. You'll see rental buildings. You'll see like old 1950s duplexes. Yeah, you'll see like a 1920 detached property in the skinny lot next to like a brand new home that's built like a year ago. So the pricing ranges wildly. Again, like this Crescent Road here, one of the fanciest roads in the city. I think there are homes here that could sell for like $10 million. And then you'll see like the 1910 bungalow that might sell for like 300, and like everything in between. So one of the most popular areas of the city. Not much to say that bad about Crescent Heights, but the one thing I hate about the area is I know why they do it. They're blocking off traffic so people don't cut through this area, but there's all sorts of cement barricades. Like, they're littered throughout the neighborhood, and you're always a bit lost trying to navigate around the area. That's the one thing I don't like about it. But that's about it. One of the nicest areas of the city. Very leafy streets. You can tell it's a very old area. One of my favorites, I would definitely put a star beside Crescent Heights. The next regions of the city that we'll talk about are Sunnyside, Hillhurst, Briar Hill, West Hillhurst, Parkdale, Point McKay, and St. Andrews Heights up here. So on the Google Maps, that's this whole region right here. So here's Sunnyside, the Kensington areas, Hillhurst, West Hillhurst, Briar Hill, St. Andrews Heights, and Parkdale is over here. And Point McKay is this little sliver right here. This video is getting a bit long now, so I'll try to condense this here. And so let's start off in Sunnyside. Actually, before we do that, I'll just kind of recap this whole region. So we have Memorial Drive, good east-west corridor, 14th Street, one of the easiest ways to get up into the north parts of the city, 10th Street, we've got 16th Avenue, the Trans-Canada Highway. There's a mall over here, North Hill Mall. This is the Foothills Medical Center. This is the biggest hospital in the city. With the Children's Hospital over here, and we've got Market Mall over here. And so all along, say from 14th Street to Kensington Road, this is all, and up 10th Street as well. This whole pocket is all very cool shops, stores, restaurants, pubs. Very lively part of the city. This is like the northwest equivalent of like the Mission area, which you talked about down here. So this is a fun place to go out with your friends. And so I'll get into Sunnyside here. So this is directly across the street from downtown. It's a very quiet neighborhood. You'd think being so close to downtown, it'd be pretty busy, but it's a tough neighborhood to get into. This whole green thing right here, this is a big ridge, which we talked about earlier. So you can't just drive into Sunnyside from this direction. You have to be coming down Memorial Drive and then exit into it. It's always tough to turn left on Memorial Drive. It's not the easiest thing to do. 10th Street right here is one of the worst intersections of the entire city. I avoid it like the plague. It's always tough. You're always sitting around forever. So to get into Sunnyside, there's a few access points into this area. One of the oldest neighborhoods, and it has kept its charm. I think because a lot of the lots are quite small and narrow, that a lot of like the new developments you see all throughout the inner city, you don't see it quite as much in Sunnyside. That people buy here, but they tend to keep the property and renovate it versus knocking it down and making like an infill. You still see some of it, but it's still, a lot of old homes remain in the area, so it has kept its charm. A lot of condo developments along 10th Street, and there's a lot of like low-rise buildings in Sunnyside, lots of rentals. I'd say it's not nearly as expensive as its neighbors in Hillhurst and West Hillhurst. Like a nicely renovated detached property might be pushing like, say, $1 million. In terms of condos, I would say the area, they probably max out around, say, $400,000. There are some townhouses in the area too, and they might be, say, 400 to 700-ish, give or take. Moving west from Sunnyside, we come across the area of Hillhurst. That's just this chunk right over here. Now, people just refer to this whole area, including Sunnyside, as Kensington, but the actual official name is Hillhurst. And one of my favorite neighborhoods in the entire city, I'd say it's probably in my top 3. It's a great area if you like to walk everywhere. From this area, there's about 5 different schools in the Hillhurst areas. So lots of schools. You can walk to downtown. You can walk to all the shops and restaurants we talked about earlier on 10th and Kensington Road. Definitely more pricey than Sunnyside. A nicely updated or like a brand new detached property in Hillhurst might be around, say, $2 million. Not as crazy as some of the areas in the inner city on the south side of the river, like the Elbow parks and stuff like that. Some of the older properties in the Hillhurst area might be like, say, $500,000, $600,000. And again, like the brand new stuff might be around $2 million. Moving west, we come across the area of West Hillhurst. Now, this area is almost identical to Hillhurst. I find the main difference, as you go west, it gets just a little bit quieter. So all along 10th Street and, say, 5th Ave, Kensington Road, Lots of different like high-rise buildings that are, some of them are commercial, some new condo developments. It can get a bit busy along those roads, but as you go west, it becomes mainly like residential. Similar pricing to Hillhurst, but West Hillhurst might be slightly more expensive. So like the detached properties might be maxing out around 2.5 million versus 2 million, but very similar neighborhoods. Not much else to say that I haven't said earlier about Hillhurst. Moving west again, so West Hillhurst refers to this area. It even crosses over Crowchild Trail to about this park over here. That's West Hillhurst. Then Parkdale is this region over here. Everything I said about the Hillhurst areas, it applies to Parkdale. They're very similar. The max pricing that you see here might be around, say, 2 million. So not too much to discuss that's different. As you get further west, you get closer to the Foothills Hospital right here. So if you're working there and you want to be close to work, Parkdale might be a good spot for you. Other than that, we got the Children's Hospital, we got the University of Calgary, and Market Mall. So Parkdale is a prime location to get around to those areas. Lots of parks in the area. It's this whole region, they're all beautiful areas. Parkdale, West Hillhurst, Hillhurst. Some of the most scenic areas of the city. Lots of paths along the river trails. Just a prime location. So after Parkdale, we're actually going to go up the hill here. So this is a giant hill up 29th Street and 19th Street over here. All the green paths you see here, this is all a big ridge. And there's two neighborhoods here that is noteworthy to touch on. Is St. Andrews Heights right here and Briar Hill, this section over here. And so it's very similar in idea to Rosedale and like Crescent Heights, which we already talked about. So first up, Briar Hill, this little pocket right over here. One of the more pricey neighborhoods in the city, especially on this little ridge right here, Briar Crescent. This, you can see all of like the Hillhurst area. You can see right into downtown. So excellent views on Briar Crescent. Homes on this little street here can go over $5 million. One of the most exclusive streets in the entire city. Once you get into the regular parts of it, it's still quite pricey. You'll see like an older 1950s home here might be around $800,000. Fixed up, definitely over $1 million. Great area. And it's also good to point out there's a C-train line right here. This is the Lions Gate or Lions Park? I always get the name mixed up. But this C-train line will take you from the North Hill Center into SAIT, the tech school, down into Sunnyside, and then down into downtown. So that's the Briar. And there's also on this side of the area, there's still some condo developments as well. I believe there's some high-rise towers in here that are, I believe it's an old folks home, so it does have some other stuff as well. But primarily it's known for being like really high-end detached properties. Now, St. Andrews Heights, exact same idea as Briar Hill. This road right here, Toronto Crescent, same idea as like Briar Crescent or Crescent Road. You've got unobstructed views of the downtown. The homes on Toronto Crescent, some of the most impressive in the city. Multi-million-dollar properties, like 3 to 5 million, I would say. Great area if you're working at the Foothills Hospital right here or the Children's Hospital over here. This might be an area to look into. Very pricey, a very exclusive neighborhood, but it's very convenient if you're working at the hospital. So if you move away from Toronto Crescent, that's like the really fancy street, into the regular parts of the neighborhood, I'd say you could get into homes here for maybe 600 to 700,000, and those homes fixed up probably over $1 million, maybe to 1.5 million max. There are pockets in here right across the street from the hospital that are a bunch of townhouses. Those townhouses might be around, say, 200 to 300,000. That's all I'll say about St. Andrews Heights. Definitely a very nice neighborhood. In this region of the city, the last pocket I'll talk about is the area of Point McKay. That's this little pocket right here, this tiny sliver. A bit of a weird area. Not weird, just a bit odd in my mind, in that it's highly built up. And so it's all townhouses, and there's 2 high-rise condo buildings just over here. Being so far from downtown, I just find it a bit odd that it's so built up. But it might be a good area if you're downsizing or just getting into the market and you like to be right next to the river. Like if you're very active and you like to be like tubing on the river or like rafting and stuff like that, it could be a good option. Or if you're working at the hospital, like the Foothills Hospital, like just short commute, or Market Mall, which again is this mall right over here, it might be a good spot for you. Not super expensive. These townhouses, I would say they range from like say 300 to 600-ish, give or take. And the two condo towers that you see over here, they might be like in the 200s to 300s. So it's not like an ultra expensive area. And there are lots of parks, this whole area right here. So if you're like an outdoorsy person, I would probably consider something like Point McKay. So the next big chunk of the city that we're talking about is this big region over here. It looks like a lot, but it all has a very similar feel to it. So it's Banff Trail, Capitol Hill, Mount Pleasant, Tuxedo Park, and Winston Heights / Mount View. And again, that's this huge chunk right over here. So as we leave downtown, this big region over here is very hilly. Now we're on top of the hill, and for the most part, this huge area is very flat. It's very grid-like. So a very residential type feeling, lots of schools in this area, tons of parks. The most obvious feature you see here is this giant green blob over here. This is Confederation Park right here. This is one of the nicest parks in the whole city. This is still parkland, but it's also a giant cemetery as well. And there's a golf course right here, Confederation Park Golf Course. And you can just see on the map here, tons of little parks all over this neighborhood. Like, there's parks everywhere. And again, it's not far at all from this massive park right here, Nose Hill Park. And so one of the nicest parts of the city, definitely the pricing comes down here compared to the stuff that we talked about south of the river. And so we'll start here in the east. And this area right here, from Edmonton Trail to the golf course right here, this is called Winston Heights / Mount View. A bit of an odd name because I don't think there are any mountain views, because all of the views in this neighborhood are facing east. The mountains are west, but still there are great views in this neighborhood. You can't really see it from the map here, but this is Deerfoot Trail right here. This is a giant like valley. It's like a valley from like here to about here, and so you can see directly across the valley. Great views towards the east. The area itself, it's a pretty convenient spot, not far away at all from downtown. And I think that you might want to live there if you are, say, working, like the airport's just over here, so it's not far from the airport. The northeast, all of this stuff over here you see is lots of commercial buildings and warehouses and stuff like that. So if you are working in the northeast, you might want to live in this area. In terms of pricing, some of the properties along these roads that have views of the valley, they might be getting up to say 1.8 million, I would say. But that's the exception. A lot of the properties that are in this neighborhood are like 1950 type bungalows. And a lot of them might be around 600,000 or so. Some of the infills, again, if they knock down an older property and they make like a duplex there, some of those infills, if they're brand new, they might be as high as like say 950. Some of the older stuff might be around say 500. Yeah, it's a good, convenient location, and we won't spend too much time on this area because this whole region is very similar. So the next region east of Winston Heights is called Tuxedo Park. That's this area right over here. So this could be a great area because all these roads, you can see on the map here, all these different little icons. These three roads, 4th Street, Center Street, Edmonton Trail, they run from downtown and they all run all the way up to pretty much to McKnight Boulevard. And all along these roads are all stores, restaurants, shops. And so they're all walking distance if you're living in Tuxedo Park. So it can be very handy for that reason. But it can be a drawback in that if you're living here, I don't know if I want to be sandwiched between all these busy roads, because I do it myself. I'm always cutting through this area, and it can be a bit busier than its neighboring communities like Mount Pleasant. But that's just a minor annoyance. It's a very nice neighborhood. In terms of pricing, not too different from Winston Heights or Mount Pleasant. Pricing in Tuxedo Park, I'd say a detached property might be maxing out at like 1.2 million. Some of the old 1915 homes might be like, say, 300,000 to 400,000. Tuxedo Park is a very old neighborhood, and you'll see a lot of those old properties. Some of the condos in this area might be up to like 250 to 400 in that range. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention about the overall region is this is kind of like infill heaven. So any kind of older property throughout this entire area, if it's like a corner lot and it's highly desirable, anything on the corner lot will be put into like a fourplex or something like that. Anything like a full-size lot, it has potential to be put into like a luxury single-family home, or more likely it's going to be put into like a duplex type property. So anything in this area, there's construction all over the place, and developers that love this entire region. So moving west, we come across the area of Mount Pleasant. That's the area right here. I believe it's 2nd Street all the way to 10th Street, I believe. So it's in this little pocket right here. Of all of these regions that I mentioned, this is probably my favorite one, just because of the proximity to the park. Again, Confederation Park is it's one of the nicest parks in the city, and some of the homes that have good proximity to it can be quite expensive. Properties for detached properties, they might start out in this area around $400,000, and they would top out around say $1.8 million for like a newer home that has good access to the park. For townhouses in this area, I would say they range around $300,000 to $600,000, and a lot of the infill properties like the duplexes, for the newer stuff, I think it might be topping out like a brand new infill might be around pushing $1 million, I would say, on average. And so all these areas are very similar, so I'm just going to briefly touch on them. Capitol Hill is the next area west of Mount Pleasant. Now, you could be driving around and not even know which neighborhood you're in. They're that similar. Not too much to discuss that's different between Capitol Hill and Mount Pleasant. Pricing, like the max in Capitol Hill might be like 1.5 versus 1.8 in Mount Pleasant, so not too much to touch on there. As you get into Capitol Hill and Banff Trail, I think they're great for like investment properties, because there's always people that want to rent in these areas just because of there's SAIT right here, and you have the University of Calgary right here. So a lot of these old 1950s type bungalows, they're great to buy, and like you put a kitchen in the basement, you can easily rent them out. And so they're always in demand. So Capitol Hill, I'm not going to touch too much on it, just it's very similar to Mount Pleasant. Banff Trail. Now, the main difference here, I find the further you get away from downtown, you start to see less of the brand new infills, and it's mainly like the 1950s type bungalows. But there are still some new developments in Banff Trail, but I find for the most part, people are buying homes that are like 1950s and 60s and fixing them up. In terms of pricing for Banff Trail, I would say like the max that you see here is around like $1 million. Not quite as pricey as Mount Pleasant, but still a great area. You can walk to the University of Calgary from here. There's a C-train line right here, and there's another one just over here. So good access to the C-train to get downtown, to get to the university. There are some stores in this pocket over here. And so that's all I'll say about Banff Trail. From Banff Trail, let's swing back over here. So north of Tuxedo Park is this neighborhood called Highland Park. This section over here, so a similar kind of idea in that all of these older lots, like these older like 1950s homes, they're being knocked down. And in the south, you see a lot of single-family homes being put up. There are some like duplexes as well. But Highland Park is, I think it's primarily the idea is to take an older lot and put 2 homes there, to have duplexes. Just because like as you get further away from downtown, the prices come down as well. And I think it makes more sense for builders to put duplexes versus single-family homes. For some of the newer infill duplexes, they might be around, I'd say, $700,000. Some of the detached properties in this area that are nicer might be around $800,000. So not nearly as expensive as other parts of the city. There are some condos in here as well. They might be around $250,000 to $300,000 or so. Good convenient area. It's not too far from downtown. Prices aren't crazy. Good access to the Deerfoot, and again, lots of stores and shops on all these busy roads. And now the area just north of Highland Park is called Greenview. So that's a little pocket right over here. Not a very big area. Now this might be an area for you if you're trying to get into the market, or if you're an investor and you want to buy like a rental property. The pricing here is very reasonable. So most of this area is like condos and townhouses, and there are little pockets throughout that are, you'll see some of the detached properties, but pricing here is very, it's very attainable. So in Greenview, a lot of the condos you see here are like $100,000 to like $250,000, so not very expensive at all. some of the townhouses here are like 150 to 300. And again, there are pockets of detached homes that could be under like 600,000. So not very expensive at all in terms of the inner city, but not a very big area, just this little sliver right here. And again, McKnight Boulevard, excellent access, lots of stores around here. So the last part of this video, we'll talk about Rosemont, not to be confused with Rosedale, which is over here. Rosemont, Cambrian Heights, and Highwood. This Queen's Park Village you see here is actually like a cemetery that's part of the park that we talked about. So what we're referring to is this pocket right over here. So here's Rosemont, here's Cambrian Heights, and here's Highwood over here. So we'll start here with Rosemont. Not a very big area, not too much to talk about. It's primarily a detached neighborhood. The average price throughout this area is maybe between 600 to 900,000. But some of the homes that are backing onto the parks here can get up to like 2.5 million. I think it's a great area, very unique. So this whole region is very hilly. So as you go north, you're going up the hill. And so some parts of the neighborhood have views and some parts are backing onto the parks. So a bit of a pricey area. Other than that, not too much to talk about in terms of Rosemont. Cambrian Heights is this pocket over here. Very similar to Rosemont, not a huge difference. Again, it's all very hilly. Like this part of the neighborhood is going straight uphill, and there are pockets that have excellent views of the city. Not quite as pricey as Rosemont on average. There are homes here that do sell into the millions that do have views of downtown, but the average price in this area is about 600,000. Again, it's close to all the parks here, this whole park system, and it's close to this giant park, Nose Hill Park. Other things to mention, if you're living in this area, one of the nicer gyms in the city is this one right here called the Calgary Winter Club. Very prestigious to be a member of this club. Good access points. 14th Street is an easy way to get from downtown all the way to the deep north. So it's a very, very central location. Other than that, not too much to discuss about Cambrian Heights. Now for these areas over here, Highwood, Cambrian Heights, Rosemont, primarily older homes. You're not seeing as many brand new builds in this area. And if they are, they're probably in very good locations, like right on the park or views of the city. But for the most part, these are all like the 1950s and 60s type properties. And the last area that we'll touch on is this one right over here called Highwood. Now, we are getting pretty far away from the downtown now, so there's not a huge amount to talk about in terms of Highwood. It's mostly just 1950s and 60s bungalows. Like, there's really not too much to discuss. Lots of schools around this area, good access to McKnight Boulevard and like Deerfoot Trail. In terms of pricing, I would say Highwood, you get properties that are between 400 to like 850. Other than that, not a huge amount to say about Highwood. It's just mainly residential, older bungalows. Well, that concludes our inner city tour. That was a lot to take in all at once. And if you're out there watching this video and you could use some help buying or selling real estate, or you're relocating from somewhere else, or just have some questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to help you out. All of my information is in the written description below. You can call, text, or email, and I'll definitely respond. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.